Continuing with Brahmasutras. We did chapter 2 in the last session. Now chapter 3. Chapter 3 deals with, it's called Sadhana Adhyaya. Sadhana is tool, Adhyaya is chapter. These are techniques and tools to reach the state of enlightenment. It's very analogous to Yoga Sutra. Yoga Sutra also has a chapter on technique and tools to reach the state of enlightenment. Brahma Sutra also has it. Comparatively speaking, I found Yoga Sutra's chapter to be better than Brahma Sutras. In fact, Brahma Sutra claims to synthesize tools and techniques of different schools, but actually it ends up accepting and refuting them instead of doing a comprehensive synthesis. And Yoga Sutras, which does not claim to synthesize various approaches, actually does that. In that sense, Yoga Sutras fulfills the objective of synthesis, harmony, openness, holistic approach of synthesizing various approaches in Hindu spirituality and psychology much better than Brahma Sutras. So this chapter, third chapter of Brahma Sutras, deals with techniques, tools, knowledge, and spiritual schools, what they say about how to reach the state of Brahma, the state of enlightenment. Brahma Sutra talks about the first necessity, the necessity of fire and disgust. The fire to reach the state of enlightenment and disgust at the ordinary life. And it's a profound observation that unless these two are there, one cannot reach the state of enlightenment. It's not an easy state to reach or sustain or make it a normal, a new normal. And then there is talk about where does the soul go after death. And the journey talked about in Brahma Sutras is this. A soul which has known, which has done some good deeds, from earth it goes to Chandra Loka, remains there for some time, takes rest, recuperation, thinking along with guides, assimilation, and then comes back to earth in a new birth. Souls that have not done good deeds, they go to Yamaloka for suffering. And there is a description of 7 hells. And I think the Christian description of 7 heavens and 7 hells may be coming from texts like Brahma Sutras, which are much older. Or they may come independently also, because these are very archetypal themes, 7 heavens and 7 hells, that occur to the minds of people all over the world, even without any cultural transmission. Very archetypal. So for ordinary souls who have done reasonable good deeds, it goes from earth to Chandraloka, back to earth. Those who have not done good deeds, have done bad deeds, they go to Yamloka. And those who have experienced Saguna Brahma or Nirguna Brahma, but even the minimum of Saguna Brahma, go to Brahma Loka. And they don't come back to earth. What happens to the soul's journey essentially is based upon the law of karma and rebirth. So Brahma Sutra accepts the centrality of the law of karma and rebirth, like Yoga Sutras and all other texts in Indian spirituality. How much time does the soul take to travel? On that, various texts, they say different things, and the Brahma Sutra tries to synthesize. But what it comes to without any dispute is that the law of incarnation and the law of freedom are in operation. In an ordinary sense, the law of incarnation operates if somebody has advanced on the spiritual path and has experienced Saguna Brahma, then the law of freedom starts operating. Shraddha is very important here. And the second element is the elements that accompany the soul on the journey. Because once we say that there is a soul and there are 5 bodies, obviously when the man dies, the question arises that the physical body is destroyed. But what about the other bodies? Do they go along with the soul, or they also disintegrate into the respective zones of the universe? Brahma Sutra tells us that some essential elements go with the soul while others are disintegrated. And this accords well with other versions. Mother also tells the same thing, where she says that those parts which are very strongly developed or have a very strong intensity, they cling onto the soul. Rest of the elements are disintegrated back into the respective zones. And the essence of those elements which have been disintegrated, the essence of karma also goes with the soul. So what goes with the soul are 2 things. One, essence of the karma, good and bad, essence of the spiritual efforts, and those elements which are very intensely developed or felt, which could not disintegrate, which means there are 2 kinds of intensities here of experience in operation. When any experience is mild or moderate, its essence is taken, but the specific content is disintegrated. But when something is very strong, then it goes with the soul in the latent form. And that might be something that affects the constitution in the next birth. So there we connect to psychoanalysis, where we say that strong experiences of past lives will have an impact on this time's constitution. And past lives may be many lives, not only the last life, but many past lives. The soul decides from this whole collection of all the past lives which elements to take up for one life. And if they get exhausted in the middle of life, the new elements are taken from the store till the store is exhausted. That storage is called Akashic records. Storage of essence and the karmic remnants of all the past lives. The Brahma Sutra then also goes into how the rebirth happens. And does the family of the person, the caste of the person, the economics, the educational availability where the person is born, the violence or non-violence, the quality of life, is it determined by past karma? And the answer is in yes. That should not in any way be used to justify the inhuman casteist situations that we have. It may be inhuman casteist situation or racist situation, color of the skin situation or language situation. So not to stretch the law of karma into a fatalism that sanctions inhumanity in any form. Something very interesting the Brahmasutra says about the law of incarnation. It says, in certain cases, the souls come down first into plants, and from plants, they go into human beings. But the tendency is to cling on to plants and not leave the plants once they are there. So it tells us something about the possibility that maybe as a plant, the existence is very pleasant. There is peace, there is stability, there is orderliness, there is a long life most of the times. And there seems to be some hidden bliss there, some happiness of nature. Then the Brahma Sutra suddenly goes into the states of the soul. Talks about 4 states. The waking state, the sleep state, the dream state that we all know about, but importantly a 4th state of self-awareness where one can be self-aware separately even while one is experiencing all these 3. A 4th state beyond these 3, which can exist across all these 3. The state of Turiya or self-awareness. And then Brahma Sutra brings about a very important statement. One of the Mahavakyas, thou art that, which means you are the Brahma. That is Brahma, thou is you. You are Brahma in reality. And what you think you are, which is not the Brahma but a person, that is a secondary temporal semi-false reality born out of avidya, ignorance. Once you become enlightened, you realize thou art that. And there are 2 entities, the real essential entity and the secondary entity that we all are, which we mistakenly believe to be the only entity, only identity that we have. Then it goes into dream analysis and says, some dreams have a prophetic quality, yes. But Brahma Sutra does not go into details of dream analysis. This is one of my favorite areas in psychoanalysis, dream analysis. Wanted to see if Brahma Sutras goes into depth of it, but it doesn't. Brahma Sutra then talks about deep sleep. And in the deep sleep, one can get in touch with Brahma. And when one really gets into deep sleep, beyond the deep sleep, not exactly the deep sleep, Brahma is not the deep sleep, but when the deep sleep gets into a point where one touches the transcendent, then one touches the Brahma. And there one forgets everything and one gets into the real identity. Brahma Sutra then goes into the soul and its adjuncts. Adjuncts meaning all those entities that accompany the soul. And how the adjuncts are slowly dropped and how the soul goes into the Brahma. And then it talks about a very strange state of the mind. It calls it in Sanskrit a very difficult word, a very big word. We don't have to go into it, but in English, the rough translation is the state of swoon, which is a state of half deep sleep and half death. And it says this also is one of the very important states to be into, and from there try to reach the Brahma. Then it talks about Brahma and it says Brahma is silence beyond words, which is true. In Taoism, they say Tao that is said is not Tao. It is beyond words. So if it gets said, it is not that thing. And Brahmasutras here again rises for once again. I should not say for once. Many times Brahmasutra rises to its heights. This is one more point where Brahmasutra rises to its heights. Profound. Says it combines two aspects related to Brahma. First, it brings in the concept of neti neti. Neti means not this. So whatever you say, you just say not this, not this. In the end, you are left with Brahman, which is beyond words. So one is the art of negation, the technique of negation to reach Brahman, by which, by process of elimination, you eliminate all that is not Brahma to reach Brahma. And once you reach Brahma, then the positive elaboration of what Brahma is, the Satyam. So it very profoundly synthesizes both the approach of neti neti and the approach of positive elaboration of Satyam, the characteristics of Brahma. And it says Brahma cannot be known by the senses, by any faculty, by any senses, but with use of some inward faculty and some spiritual ability, one can experience Brahma. It then goes into the law of karma and action, and says Lord gives the fruits of actions. It reiterates what Gita says. It goes then into Sagun worship, of idol worship. And idol worship actually is idol therapy plus idol-centered self-development. It's actually, you can call it idol-centered self-development, which can take a limited form of which is idol worship, another limited form is idol therapy. But in reality, it is idol-centered self-development program. Those who are interested can see my videos on idol therapy. Brahmasutra then goes into the goal of the individual, which is bliss, which is enlightenment, the state of enlightenment. The state of enlightenment gives you this: bliss, immortality, peace, freedom, purity. Immortality in the psychological sense, not in the biological sense. All enlightened people die. So tragic but true. Brahmasutra then goes into a question: can an enlightened soul ever be reborn on earth? And it says there is no compulsion, but for a mission, a perfected soul, enlightened soul can also come back. And then it goes into different types of upasana. Upasana means spiritual processes and what results it gets. So it goes into discussion of rituals and ceremonies, which I don't find much interesting. Also, I don't find it profound. I find it very, very ordinary. And then it tries to understand it literally or metaphorically, what is written in various scriptures on rituals or ceremonies. This is something not to my taste. I find it very boring and very ordinary. Should not use the word boring. In fact, not the right word. I don't even like the word. Find it uninteresting. Then the book goes into what the soul carries with it and what it shakes off after death. It says the liberated soul shakes off good and evil both at death. The knower of Sagun and Nirgun Brahma go to respective spaces. Sagun Brahma goes to Brahma Loka. Nirgun Brahma merges into the Brahma. The knower of Sagun Brahma goes to Brahma Loka. The knower of Nirgun Brahma merges into the Brahma. And the one with Sagun Brahma experience in ordinary life, in our human life, goes to Brahma Loka. There completes his sadhana and then merges into the Brahma. So the Sagun person has to then experience Nirgun Brahma and then merge into Brahma. Then the book says the Vidyas in different Upanishads are similar. Some are even same and some are different. It's true. Tries to bring them together. What I found was some of them were very ritualistic, narrow, ordinary. And these are very ordinary questions and ordinary mindset in many of the discussions. The discussions here of the rituals are very ordinary. Then it takes up the point of Charvakas, the Indian hedonists and the agnostics, who treat consciousness as an emergent epiphenomenon. Brahmasutra refutes this and says consciousness is not an epiphenomena but a priori, something that cannot be reduced to anything other than itself. The book then goes into various vidyas. And it says various vidyas are for various desires and objectives, and these vidyas are given differently in different scriptures. And some of the vidyas, although given differently, may have the same goal, which is enlightenment. And we can use the vidyas in single vidya form or in combination or one after the other in a chronological order. It then goes into upasana, various combination packages of rituals, modes of worship, and gets into what is necessary and what is not, and says that the whole world of upasana, the whole world of spiritual packages of spiritual processes, it is a pure creative canvas, and you can pick and choose elementals from different schools, different approaches to create your own package of upasana. And very important element there is idol therapy. Idol therapy is a very deep subject. It has degenerated into idol worship, but actually it is idol therapy. In fact, not even idol therapy, it is idol-centered self-development. And in this broad area of idol-centered self-development, there is idol worship, there is idol therapy, there is human potential movement centered around idols, and there is a mystical element related to idols, and there is a energy element related to the idol, and there is a storage of knowledge element related to the idol. So idol centered, what if you can call it broadly, idol science is a broad canvas by itself. And in the idol science, we use all tools. Let me just say something about this. In idol science, we make use of deepest elements of science, psychology, spirituality, culture, mythology. Psychoanalytically, it's a very interesting subject. Concepts of emotional attachment, emotional relationships, object relationships, internalization, knowing by internalization, learning by internalization, all these esoteric concepts are made use of in idol therapy, including mourning and catharsis. Idol science is a science by itself. I have commented upon it in various videos. If interested, go through it on my YouTube channel or some of my blogs. Brahmasutra then starts talking about if somebody has taken a sannyas, can he go back to ordinary life? And it says no, which I don't feel is correct. Again, at this point, the Brahmasutra becomes very rigid. And I feel this is one of the points where things have got added and contaminated the Brahmasutra. Just as some statements related to the caste also are something which are later additions and contamination, which need to be removed from the Brahmasutra. If a sannyasi wants to go back and cannot go back, all you will have is scandals in the spiritual school where he resides. This difficulty you still have in India and all over the world, where once somebody becomes a priest or a sannyasi, he cannot go back even if he wants to, and then the scandals come about. This actually should be a completely voluntary activity without social pressure or canons of this type. The book then goes into the 4 popular objectives of human life: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, spirituality, economics, desires. Earth is not only economics, earth also means knowledge and enlightenment. Then the book goes into this concept of sacrifice, that we all have to sacrifice, and we should see our doings in life as sacrifices in the journey of the universe. And one who sacrifices something only if one is convinced of existence beyond the body life. Otherwise, everyone would become the Charvaka. It does not go deep into the concept of sacrifice like Gita does, but mentions it in the passing. The knowledge of the self puts an end to all actions. So the question is, after enlightenment, is there any action? And the answer is depends on the choice of the enlightened person, his program of life, and the necessity of the universe. And there is a plurality here. We have this entire spectrum from Avdut, enlightened person who is an Avdut who does not do anything, to Sri Krishna who does everything despite being enlightened, or I should say, after being enlightened. The point is, it is a choice, and knowledge of Brahma frees one of all responsibility, all social responsibility. So, after enlightenment, it's a choice. You can if you wish to, you may not if you wish to. The book then takes up an important assertion by sage Jaimini, and it says knowledge, Jaimini says knowledge is subordinate to karma. And the book refutes it, and I would agree with it, that there is an inner calculus whereby knowledge also takes you towards enlightenment, karma also takes you towards enlightenment. So does energy work, so does affective work, so does karmic work. And this deeper inner, more fundamental inner calculus is something we have to conceptualize and put forward as a theory. Unfortunately, the Brahmasutra doesn't do it. I expected it would be doing it, but it doesn't. It doesn't create a meta theory where all that is said in each of the Upanishads can be explained in terms of that meta theory. So there is consideration, acceptance, and refutation of what is said in Upanishads and Smritis, but there is no creation of a meta theory which can explain each of them as specific instances. Book then says taking sannyasa or being in sannyasa is not something which can be a compulsion. The Shruti does not enjoin anybody to take sannyasa. So there is sannyasa ashram as a stage of life that Shruti enjoins, but sannyas as a way of life across the whole of life, the Shruti does not enjoin. And then it says karma is also needed for Atmajnana, which is true. Because even after one has experiences, one has to put it to test by karma to see if the experiences are solid, consolidated, rooted, and if ordinariness is still at work. Karma is a very good testing bed. Suddenly there is a turn and one gets into this whole concept of pap and punya, sin and virtue. And it talks about Maha Papa, major sin. And one of the major sins it talks about is a disciple having intercourse with the guru's wife. I think this again has come from somewhere else. It's completely out of flow. And it's completely out of tune with what is normally being discussed or what is the objective of this book. So like some statements on caste, some statements on analogies, this also is something which has got in later, I believe. It's not a part of the original Brahma Sutra, but this has to be put aside, removed from Brahma Sutra. In fact, we need a commission to go into this, a commission of spiritually enlightened people and scholars, and sanitize all the old scriptures and books from what has got in later as a contamination. It's very easy to find it out. It's not difficult. Now, Brahmasutra does not talk about, but in Shrutis, not in Shrutis, but in scripture somewhere, there is a concept of Papa, sin. And the sins are divided into two, ordinary sins and great sins. Ordinary sins have atonement, prayaschit. Great sins don't have any atonement, no prayaschit. You have to suffer the consequences of the great sins, the 5 Maha Papas. And the 5 Maha Papas that are given in scriptures are killing a child of less than 10 years, rape of a woman, gambling, eating cow meat, and treason with the Guru. And one form of treason can be adultery with the Guru's wife. That is not given there. There, treason is said more in the context of deceiving the Guru. Nothing sexual about it. But this statement in the Brahmasutras takes that treason with the Guru in the sexual context. And psychoanalysis, of course, would see it as a Oedipal transgression of the disciple when the Guru and the Guru's wife become the parent figures. And therefore, the Maha Papa is one of the original fundamental taboos. And if a student is caught in such a treason of the Guru, he is dismissed by the teacher and then he can live only one ashrama all his life. This also, I think, did not be in such a deeply psychological or philosophical text. These are very ordinary administrative, social policy issues, very macro issues which can be taken up in some other book, don't belong really to this book. The book then again comes back to the tools and techniques of mantra, japa, mysticism, prescribed on the path, silence, mauna, meditation also prescribed on the path. And it talks about a childlike state after realization. That after enlightenment, the person becomes pure like a child, simple like a child, a very positive and loving person like a child. All the negative effects and motivations go away. And the realization may vary. It may be realization of an avdhuta who does nothing after enlightenment, or somebody like Krishna who after enlightenment does everything in the world, in fact more than any ordinary man would do. And the realization, if it happens to an intellectual or a leader, then post-realization he gets into conceptualization. He goes into conceptualization, he goes into theorization. But if it realization, take example of Sri Aurobindo. If you look at Sri Aurobindo, if you look at Swami Shivanand, Shankaracharya, they were deeply trained intellectuals, philosophers who got enlightened and they conceptualized, wrote extensively, theorized. You take realization of Swami Ramakrishna or Ramana Maharshi. They were not trained as intellectuals, as philosophers. So they did not get into theorizing so much. In the recent times, we see Guru Gobind Singh who synthesized this very well and gave the concept of a saint soldier. Enlightened person, enlightened like a saint, but outwardly doing the duties of a soldier for the sake of good in the society, good in the world. And this is very true for today. In today's times, in contemporary times, when we are facing the totalitarian challenge from jihadis, communists, freedom and civilization is in danger. Guru Gobind Singh and his concept of the saint soldier has to be our contemporary ideal. This is the only thing that can mobilize us and take us to victory for the sake of civilization and freedom. The book then gets into enlightened person, how does he live? And one good concept that comes up is he lives without any attachment. One Hindi writer, he gave a very good definition of it. He said the enlightened person is living as though he is dead, but he is moving about in the market. I think it was Nirmal Verma who gave this definition. I'm not very sure, but one Hindi writer said this, that imagine you are moving about in the market, you move about every day, but nobody can see you. And you also don't have anything to do with anybody, any more desire to get involved with any person or any event. So you are virtually walking through the market as though you are dead. So imagine you are moving about in the market, nobody can recognize you, nobody can interact with you, nobody can see you, and you don't have any desire on your side. So this living without any attachment, any entanglement, any personal interest, almost living as dead, is one way to describe the enlightened person's living. And this can take many colors and flavors, from an Avadhut kind of living to Krishna's kind of living. But one thing is common, there is no entanglement. Involvement may vary from no involvement to complete involvement, but entanglement is not there. So in sense of entanglement, you are living as a dead person. Instead of using the word dead, you should say living as a really free person. So with this, we complete the third chapter. In the next session, we will do the fourth chapter. It will be a short one because there are too many ordinary analogies which I don't want to spend time on. I think after the fourth, I will give a consolidated commentary, which will be more interesting rather than this line by line. But we have to go through it as a part of what we have decided. So with this, we complete the third chapter of Brahmasutras. Thank you.